We are getting closer to 20,000 subscribers here on Bengals Breakdown. We are only 118 new subscribers away. So help me out, hit that sub button, and stay up to date on all things Bengals news. The goal is to hit 20,000 subscribers before the first game of the season, but ideally, I would love to hit it on this video. So get down there, stay up to date on all things Bengals news, and hit that sub button for me right now. All right, coming up on today's video, the Bengals have officially signed 14 out of their 16 practice squad spots. So we're going to break down each player that the Bengals ended up bringing back on their practice squad today. First up here is quarterback Brett Rypien. He played the preseason with the Minnesota Vikings, and look, it goes for all of these guys on the practice squad. There's no such thing as a bad practice squad signing. So, you don't have to love what a lot of these guys, bring to the table. But I think with the Bengals only having two quarterbacks on their 53-man roster right now, they had to go out there and they had to sign that emergency third quarterback. And Brett Rypien's a guy that, a lot of people know. And hopefully you won't have to go to him throughout the season. But it's just good that the Bengals went out there and they were able to sign an extra body. All right, Gary Brightwell is another guy that I really loved during the preseason. I thought he ran extremely hard, and I thought he did some good stuff against the Eagles as well, doing that kick return and doing that punt return stuff. He was a guy that, I was kind of hoping that the Bengals were going to be able to get him on that 53-man roster, but didn't end up happening. I will also mention that no players that the Bengals ended up waiving yesterday got picked up by anybody. So these players that you're going to see today, they're very familiar. They were already on this Bengals team outside of a couple of guys like Rypien on there. But Gary Brightwell, a guy that I, am very excited that the Bengals ended up signing him. Kendall Milton falls in that same bucket as well. Out of Georgia, I thought, during the preseason, he didn't get an opportunity necessarily to play behind that starting offensive line a whole lot. But, when he was out there behind that, second offensive line and that third offensive line, a lot of the times, we talked during those instant reactions and stuff about the fact that he was going out there. And a lot of the time, a lot of his yardage came after contact. So he's a guy, again, that runs really, really hard. And, maybe if he's able to get there behind a starting offensive line, he could contribute a little bit more. I do also think Kendall Milton offers you some special teams coverage ability. There's a couple times he had some really nice tackles on some of that kick coverage as well. So if one of those guys go down, I think Kendall Milton is an option there for the Bengals. All right, Jordan Moore, wide receiver that the Bengals ended up waiving the other day as well. They ended up picking him up on their practice squad, and look, he didn't do a ton during the preseason for the Bengals. I think he even had a couple of drops that hit him right in the wrong spot, right in the hands as well. So, at the end of the day, it's just another body for the Bengals at that wide receiver spot. Hopefully, he's not going to be a guy that the Bengals end up calling up, but, they end up getting him. He clears waivers, and they get him on this practice squad. Isaiah Williams is a guy that if the Bengals were to end up having to bring one of these guys up, I think Isaiah Williams is one of those wide receivers that I would be at least a little bit more comfortable with signing up. I thought he showed a lot of positivity during the preseason as well. Only 3 receptions for 33 yards, but another guy, when they put him out there on punt return and kick return, he had a lot of speed out there, and I think he's a guy that could make something happen in the return game as well. So very excited. Maybe a guy like, Jermaine Burton, if something happens to him again, I think Isaiah Williams would be that first receiver called up. All right, let me know down at the pinned comment of today's video, who's your favorite practice squad signing by the Cincinnati Bengals? We're going to go through the entire list here, but let me know what you guys think. Who's your favorite practice squad signing by the Cincinnati Bengals? All right, we all knew that the Bengals really needed a lot of offensive line help, and, they didn't go get anybody to add to the 53-man roster. You would obviously have needed to do some more roster movement on that point as well, but they did end up signing a couple offensive linemen. Devin Cochran is a guy that they ended up signing here, and look, he's a guy that you don't necessarily want to have to go to during the season, but just adding another body along that offensive line. I know he's not on the 53-man roster, but at least you have somebody somewhere to go if something were to happen during the season. Same thing goes here with Andrew Coker. I didn't think he played very well when he did play during the preseason. He was a UDFA last year for the Cincinnati Bengals. So, these UDFAs aren't necessarily guys that you expect to be able to go out there and contribute. Really, it's kind of lucky if they end up making the roster. And, two defensive players for the Bengals ended up making the 53-man roster UDFA signings for them. So we'll see what happens, but really hope Coker's not a guy that they have to go to during the season. Jaxson Kirkland also added to this Bengals practice squad, and he is a guy that, the Bengals did have to go to a little bit last year as well. Ended up playing one game for them last year. Was a little bit of a penalty boy, I think, during the preseason as well. But again, just, you don't have to be excited about guys that the Bengals end up signing or any team ends up signing on the practice squad. At the end of the day, these are, just guys that you rely on getting you some looks during, the week of preparation, and hopefully they don't have to end up calling some of these guys. Hopefully, if they do add to that offensive line, it's via free agency or maybe even a trade as well. All right, we'll continue with some more signings here in just a second, but today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Football is almost here, and college football is officially back, so don't miss any of the action this season on Prize Picks. I personally use Prize Picks for so many different types of sporting events, whether it's professional football, baseball, basketball, college sports, MMA, boxing, and so much more. Prize Picks has it. Prize Picks is a ton of fun, and if you guys know ball, you can win real money all season long on Prize Picks. This is the power play that we got cooked up for the first official weekend of the college football season. Ohio State versus Texas, going with Arch Manning, 1.5 passing touchdowns, going with more than on that. Jeremiah Smith, he's good for at least a couple of big plays, right? I would assume 49.5 receiving yards is going to be a very, very easy get for Jeremiah Smith. So going with more than on him. And first start here for Julian Sayin. So might be a little bit of growing pains going up against a very, very good Texas defense. Going with the more than on a half interception for Julian Sayin. Prize Picks is very simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks correct, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money today. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 different states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. So download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That link is going to be down in the description of today's video. It's also going to be down at the pinned comment of today's video as well. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's continue on with our practice squad list here. Isaiah Thomas is another defensive end that the Bengals ended up signing. And I thought during the preseason, a lot of times he was there kind of later in games, but had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and he had multiple pressures during those preseason games as well. Even had that tipped ball that ended up getting intercepted as well during the Colts, or against the Colts anyways. So, he was a guy that I was kind of questioning. I wonder if the Bengals try to get him on the roster. They don't go that route, but I really do like that practice squad signing there by the Bengals. Joe Giles-Harris is another guy that looked pretty decent during the Bengals training camp here. Also had an interception in one of those games. I think that was that Commanders game that he ended up having that interception. And I don't necessarily know if he's going to be a guy that offers any type of special teams ability for the Bengals this year, but, just having another guy at that linebacker spot, I think is a really good thing. And, I thought he showed some decent stuff at least. Not amazing, but decent stuff during the preseason. So are you upset that the Bengals added no players during the waiver wire? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. As we kind of went over last night, there weren't a ton of really good options out there, but let me know what you guys think. Type Y for yes or N for no down in the comments section of today's video. Now, Maema Njongmeta was last year's UDFA that ended up making the roster, and he didn't make the roster this year. They ended up waiving him, but did not get picked up, and the Bengals signed him now on this practice squad. Man, he went absolutely crazy during that Colts game in terms of the amount of tackles that he was getting. Almost every tackle that he ended up making in the preseason was against the Colts there. And, I think he's also another guy that if someone were to go down on special teams, Maema Njongmeta, I think, is a pretty solid tackler. So, that's like the one thing on some of those, kick coverage and, special teams coverage teams. You need guys that are sure tacklers, and I think Maema Njongmeta definitely fits that bill. All right, Jalen Davis, cornerback. The Bengals also ended up signing him on their practice squad. He had some ups, he had some downs during the preseason, had a couple of tackles, but, outside of that, wasn't really able to, do much. Kind of, got cooked a couple of times, especially during that Eagles game. But, like I'll continue to say, with Bralyn Lux here as well, the Bengals ended up signing him, both of those guys. At the end of the day, you don't have to, love these guys on this practice squad. Bralyn Lux was also a UDFA this year, so not a guy that was expected to make this 53-man roster whatsoever. But, you're kind of thin at that cornerback spot, and with this Bengals defense just in general, you just never know how things are going to shake out. So you added a couple more corners to that practice squad. I think is a good thing by the Bengals. So who else would you like the Bengals to sign to their practice squad? They have 2 more openings. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section of today's show. All right, the Bengals also had a couple of players that they ended up waiving and putting on IR. They cleared waivers. Caleb Etienne, Tanner McLaughlin, and Cordell Volson all ended up clearing waivers. So they're going to end up reverting back to IR, and we'll see how long they're going to end up being out for the Bengals. And maybe when they get off IR, those are some of those guys that they end up adding to that practice squad.